Good afternoon, everyone. We will be starting in just about 5 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from across the Caribbean, Latin America, US, and the Philippines. It is with pleasure I welcome each of you to this afternoon's session entitled The Quest for Personal Leadership, that will feature our very own Dr. Julian Ferdinand. Today's session is part of a series of webinars being held across the globe as we recognize and celebrate International Leadership Week, an event pioneered by the Institute of Leadership and Management in the UK. The 𝗬𝗂𝗍𝗲 GSB is pleased to be part of this event and host this afternoon's session. Over the next 60 minutes, you'll be taken on a journey, inspired and challenged as we all seek to achieve new levels of personal excellence. As a reminder, keep your mics muted and your cameras off. We encourage you to engage with us and the other participants throughout the session using the chat feature for comments and the question and answer box for your questions. Please note, questions will only be pulled from the question and answer box, so place your specific questions for our featured speaker in that area. These will be addressed in the last 10 minutes of the session. As we get ready to kick off this session, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Julian Jules Ferdinand. Dr. Ferdinand is an operations manager and a human resource consultant at One St. Vincent Group of Companies. He is also the managing director of the consultancy firm Ferdinand Associates, Inc. Dr. Ferdinand is a business consultant, lecturer, and author. He lectures at the UWI Lok Jack Global School of Business in Trinidad and the 𝗂𝗲𝗍𝗂𝗍𝗂𝗍𝗂 School of Business in Barbados at the master's and at the BBA level. His specialist areas include strategic management, multinational strategy, global strategy and innovation, corporate turnaround, organizational behavior, cross-cultural management, executive leadership, and human development. Dr. Ferdinand was a recipient of the Best Lecturer Award in 2014, 2015, 2017, and 2018 from the Lok Jack Global School of Business. He was also presented the Best Practicum Supervisor Award when the business school introduced this prize in 2017. He has conducted numerous management and leadership training across the Eastern Caribbean in both private and public sector organizations. Dr. Ferdinand is a Chancellor's nominee of the Campus Council for 𝗂𝗲𝗄𝗏 campus of the University of the West Indies and a member of the Council's Finance and General Purpose Committee. He is also the chairman of the Audit Committee and the chairman of the Board of Directors in RBC Holdings Eastern Caribbean Limited. Outside of his many academic accolades, he's a certified user of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator and the 𝗬𝗏𝗂𝗡𝗏 personality factors. His life's journey saw him as former Chief Executive Officer of the Eastern Caribbean Group, a former chairman of the OECF Distribution and Transportation Company, a former chairman of St. Vincent and the Grenadines Development Bank, a past president of St. Vincent and the Grenadines Chamber of Industry and Commerce, a past president of the Rotary Club St. Vincent, and a former vice president of St. Vincent and Grenadines Red Cross Society. Currently, Dr. Ferdinand is the director of the Foundation for the Development of the Caribbean Children. As I mentioned before, he's an author and has written and published 2 motivational books, Be Inspired and The Journey, Destined for Greatness. He has a weekly column in the St. Vincent newspaper where he writes extensively on the need to cultivate habits that retain a focus on constantly improving personal performance. He's a former member of parliament in the St. Vincent and the Grenadines House of Assembly, where he functioned as one of the 2 senates for the New Democratic Party. I'm extremely happy and excited to hear from Dr. Ferdinand this morning on the quest for personal excellence. Welcome once again. A reminder to use your Q&A in the feature in order to address any questions. And I now hand you over to Dr. Ferdinand. Dr. Ferdinand.
Thank you so very much, Joanne, and welcome to all those who are with us today. We're going to be pressed a little bit for time, but I'm sure, I'm trusting, I'm optimistic that we will all be able to take away something from the time that we will spend together. So welcome to the session. As we go through, you will see a lot of graphics. The whole intention of that is not to pretty up the presentation, but to enhance what we take away, because they say normal people, persons who have their faculties intact, there's no trauma to the brain due to chemical use or physical accidents or anything like that. They have vision. In normal, quote unquote, normal people, 85% of what you learn is linked to what you're seeing. So I would try to enhance what I want to share with you by putting the content in a very graphic presentation. So here we go. I'm taking you down Leadership Avenue, the quest for personal excellence. A lot of what I will share, and maybe I should say all of what I will share, is not likely to be new to you. It is common, and it is based on common sense. But we know that common sense is not always common practice. So from time to time, you and I need to be reminded of some of the things that we need to do to better our best efforts. So even though we're going to be pressed for time, we will move through speedily, and I will make sure that we leave some time at the end for questions and answers. So the graphics that you will see are taken from Google Images, and the background settings, like even the background setting for this one with the 2 pins at the top and so on, that's taken from Crystal Graphics. So here is where we are in this game of life that sometimes seems like a puzzle. We are here now. The past is there, and we could look back at the past and we see a lot of successes, but we look back at the past and we see mistakes that we have made too. All of us make mistakes. And sometimes we hold on to those mistakes for a little too long. We can go back and change them. Maybe going forward, we may be able to do something to counteract some of the errors that we've made, some of the foolishness that we've done, some of the foibles that we've been engaged in. And again, I underscore, all of us, including myself, would have made errors of judgment and would have made mistakes. So we will focus a little bit on the skills and the techniques that I think you need to develop as we go through. The importance of having the right attitude that we should focus on, and what we need to do, all of us need to do, to control the thoughts that we entertain. You know the saying very well. If you sow thought, you reap an action. If you sow an action, you do it long enough, you reap a habit. If you sow a habit, you reap a character. If you sow a character, you reap a destiny. So if we roll it right back, the destiny is often determined by the thoughts that we entertain. So here it is, here we are. We are good at what we do, every one of us. And I want to throw a very special challenge to the young people who are on, because a lot of the thoughts that I want to share are especially geared for you. But we're not losing sight of those of us who are in the post-youth segment of our lives. We too can benefit from some of these thoughts. So we create dissatisfaction with what we would term mediocrity or average performance as we focus on excellence. And we understand, we appreciate that as good as I am, I can be better. Every last one of us, as good as you are, you can be better. So how I want to spend the next half an hour or so going through, and again, you notice from the speed with which I'm speaking, I want to make sure that we cover the topics there. So we can talk about some outstanding Caribbean nationals. We will look at and share some general thoughts. I want to spend a little time talking about winning attitudes, understanding and appreciating that when you and I engage in creating and maintaining and sustaining winning attitudes, we are more likely to excel. Mastering personal and team performance, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then at the end of it, we ask this pointed question: what does this mean to me? so that we can personalize it. And then we have, as Joanne mentioned, we will have some questions and answers. So I want to focus, yes, I know we have persons who are tuned in from the Philippines, from Europe, from North America, wherever you tuned in from. Forgive me if my focus becomes very Caribbean. And so even this slide, as we start looking at some outstanding Caribbean nationals, and I invite you, I challenge you that even as we go through, make a note of some of these persons that you need to follow upon. So like in the larger circle there, 𝗬𝗓𝘁𝗲𝗏, who invented steel pan in Trinidad and Tobago, that has now gone global. In the medium-sized circle, 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏 and Derek Walcott, we can talk a little bit more about them as we go through, who received the Nobel Prize in the case of 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏 for economics, in the case of Derek Walcott for literature. And in the smaller bubble, Professor Julian Ferdinand, who just recently retired as principal of the 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏 campus of the University of the West Indies. And we have a quotation from her that we will share as we go through. So we talked about 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, who received the Nobel Prize for economics in 1979 from a relatively small island in St. Lucia. And the currency that you see at the top of this slide is the East Caribbean $100 bill. And you notice that he is prominent on the back of the bill, telling us, reminding us that it is possible for persons from small developing countries to play on the world stage. In 1979, throughout all the world, Sir Arthur Lewis, then Arthur Lewis, was considered to be the most brilliant economist in all the world from a small Caribbean territory. St. Lucia also produced the 1992 Nobel Prize winner for literature in the form of Derek Walcott. Not to be left out, Trinidad also in 2001 boasted with pride about the 𝗬𝗏𝘁𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 also winning the prize, the Nobel Prize for literature. And I'm trusting that our young people in particular will understand and appreciate that Caribbean people operate, function, excel on the world stage. But our females are not to be left out. Our women continue to do very well. And I especially want to focus in, I want to highlight our Caribbean women in science and technology. The reason why I want to highlight that too is because so very often our girls are socialized incorrectly so to think that sciences are not for them. So you could look up in your own time. I wish we had time where I could explain the accomplishments of all of these persons, but we just don't have. Oliver in Barbados, outstanding, and we'll have a quotation from her in a while. Ayana Samuels of Jamaica, Petal Punalal Jito of Guyana, all in science. And though we lift high, we recognize the outstanding accomplishment of Dr. 𝗬𝗍𝗏 Ferdinand, who is now Dean of the Department of Science and Technology at the 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 campus of the University of the West Indies. No easy feat. And I want to emphasize, they are not in those positions because they're female. Their positions are not cosmetic. They have earned the right to the laurels that we give them. And Dr. Camille Wadrup-Aline of Trinidad and Tobago, you need to look up these persons on the internet. Outstanding Caribbean woman. So let's delve in now with some general thoughts. And I like to remind us that in life, there are doors, there are many doors that are open to us. I want to emphasize three main doors. There's a door called laziness, and many persons go through there. We see them in the workplace. Sometimes we see them even in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our service clubs. in our mosques, in our churches, going through the door called laziness. Don't want to do anything. The old people used to tell us, those are people who want to live light and weigh heavy. You could look up that old saying too if you've never heard it before. There are some who go through that door called mediocrity. Average performance. They only do enough in school to get a pass mark when they have the capacity, the potential to come out with top grades, but they're controlled by that mediocrity. But the door of excellence is the one that I want us to focus on. And we're going to talk on how we, male and female, it's not gender specific, what do we need to do to excel? Louis Oliver, the scientist that I referred to in one of the earlier slides, says this to us. Everyone wants their child to be a doctor or a lawyer, but hospitals and law firms hire relatively few people. That's the truth. Science creates thousands of jobs. We can do that in the Caribbean if we train our young people to value science and innovation. I wish we had time where we could focus more intently on that. That's a whole new webinar that I believe should be organized. So we influence them, we encourage them to pursue their dreams. And if their dreams revolve around science and technology, let them fly. 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝗏 says, mediocrity has no greater consolation than in the thought that excellence is not important. Now, for those of you who are already trying to scribble down, to write down, to record all of those quotations, you can get them because Joanne will be prepared. Just send an email to the administrators and they'll send you a copy of today's presentation. I like this one from Dr. Rick Grigsby. He reminds us, don't be average. Good enough isn't good enough if it can be better. And better isn't good enough if it can be best. So we take that on board, every one of us, knowing that we can be better. And I like this from Dr. John DiMartini. Great geniuses are willing to pay the price. They're willing to make sacrifices for their dreams. Instead of partying with their friends, they spend hours practicing, studying, and preparing. They give up pleasure and entertainment and face their fears and doubts. They do whatever it takes. There's nothing wrong with that because pain and pleasure always come together as a pair. This is a deep, deep quotation that all of our young people should really take to heart. They spend hours practicing, studying, and preparing. And for the young ones among us, I throw out a word of caution. Avoid persons who are distracting you when you need to be practicing, studying, and preparing. Some of them may disguise themselves as your friends, but they may not necessarily be friends. Yes, create balance. There's time for you to relax. There's time for you to do your chores, your domestic chores, and so on. But there's time for practicing, for studying, and preparing. The older ones among us know this very well. Many of us would have committed it to heart. The heights of great men reached and kept were not obtained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. That's the kind of commitment that we need to have if we intend to excel. So let me spend a little time now sharing some insights with you on what I refer to the winning attitudes as we pursue excellence. And I normally tell persons, imagine that you have a three-legged stool and attitudes is on the seat, on the top. And each of the legs give us something to remind us of what we need to do as we pursue excellence and these winning attitudes. The older ones among us may recognize this face. He played cricket for the West Indies, especially in the 1960s. Some of you may be familiar with this type of photograph where wherever you bolt at him, he can hit you for 6 or hit you for 4. And many photographs see him on the ground like that. His name, Rohan Kanai from Guyana. But I want to share a different Kanai with you, which becomes the first leg of the 3-legged stool. The acronym CANI. Develop a Kanai attitude, constant and never-ending improvement. That every task you have to perform, the next time you do it, try to do it better than you did before. You say, but Jules, there will come a time when I max out, when I can't do it. I'm yet to find that. And I wish I had more time because I could share with you persons who live this Kanai attitude. And that continues to be their legacy, constant and never-ending improvement. The next leg is the can-do. Many times you hear people saying, I can't do that, I can't do that. And I wish that we could share experiences of somebody like Les Brown, who at one time had that can-do attitude because he was diagnosed as educationally subnormal until a teacher intercepted him and told him, don't let anyone's negative categorization of you become your categorization of yourself. If you are viewing this presentation and you fit into that category where you keep telling yourself that you can't do, this is a useful reminder. Maybe it's a God-sent message for you that a lot of the things you tell yourself you can't do, you can. And the third leg is what I call it, do it now. Avoid procrastination. If you have a task to do, begin it. One of my lecturers, my teachers from St. Martin Secondary School many years ago in the 1970s said to me, beginning is half done. If you have a task to perform, begin it, and it's half done. If it's one thing, one slide I want you to take away from this webinar, it is this one. The 3 critical pillars that you and I need to embrace, we need to imbibe it. The Kanai attitude, constant and never-ending improvement. The can-do attitude, that we can do. And they do it now so that we avoid procrastination. Nelson Mandela says, vision without action is merely daydreaming. But vision with action can change the world. What aspect of the world are you summoned to influence? Say, oh, not Jules, me, I can't. No. You have a particular task that you must perform. You will embrace the Kanai attitude, the can-do attitude, and the do-it-now attitude. And you would make yourself proud, make your family proud, make your nation proud, make this world proud. So let's look a little bit now in relation to mastering personal and team performances. And now, even the topic that we advertised is personal excellence. I want to underscore that none of us live in isolation of other people. And a lot of our accomplishments, all of our accomplishments, involve somebody else. So that young person who got 14 subjects or 20 subjects, because now they're writing many subjects at Cape, you may pat yourself on the shoulder and say, look at what I have done. But you didn't do it on your own. There were teachers there to help you. There were colleagues to encourage you and maybe to teach you 1 or 2 things. Parents, especially mothers, in the corner there rallying the support. Yes, you played a major role, but you didn't do it on your own. And maybe now is as good a time as any for you to think of a way to thank those persons who have helped you. Those of us who are older, that exercise is for us too, that we could look back at the persons who contributed to our success, to where we are now, and find a little way, an email, a handwritten note, a little gift, a fruit basket, something that we give in appreciation for what may have been done some time ago. So as we pursue excellence, develop winning attitudes, always seek to better your best efforts. This becomes important, hang out with winners. And the flip side of that, avoid hanging out with negative people and avoid thinking negative or negatively. Hang out with winners. I strongly believe that those of us who will excel as we pursue excellence would have created a mission, a vision, and a purpose. If you haven't done so yet, now is as good a time as any. I could share my mission statement with you. It has helped me tremendously. My mission, to have my life contribute to others for good. To have my life contribute to others for good. So what I say, like what I'm saying now, what I write, like what I write in books and in newspaper articles, what I do should be to help, not hurt. Should be to heal situations, not retard. There will be times when we will fail. And sometimes the failure may come about even after we have done the best preparation possible. Sometimes there are situations beyond us or outside us that would result in failure. But always remember, failure is not final. We can regroup. We can reverse to go forward. We can learn from the mistakes, from the errors, and do better going forward. And having learned from those mistakes, we reach out to help others that we see making those same mistakes. I like to describe it as intercept with intent, that we see somebody heading in the wrong direction. Sometimes we shut ourselves up, we shut ourselves away and say, that's none of my business. Sometimes we avoid intercepting because we're not sure how they would react. But the goodness within us will push us to intercept with intent. That young child in the neighborhood who's behaving badly. And yes, we screw up our noses and we argue, we talk to other people about, look at how bad that situation is, but we can make it better. Bitterness in that child can be made better. And I want to also mention to us that we need to be prepared to take calculated risk. Now, I'm not encouraging people to be ignorant and hasty and harsh. Calculated risk, and that becomes the critical part. Be prepared to take calculated risk. This underscores that you calculated. What's the risk? What's the exposure? And how can I work to reduce the possibilities of failure? But we move forward. There are cultures where that type of attitude is created. Say, but Jules, what are you talking about? We know, if you read a book called Getting China and India Right by Gupta and Wang, I think it came out in maybe 2008, 2009. Getting India and China Right, or China and India Right. They describe that the government, successive governments in India and China have created, and this is how they describe it, a new breed of aggressive business persons. A new breed of aggressive business persons. We can do the same by encouraging our young people and our not so young people to be prepared to take calculated risk. So Land, who invented the Polaroid camera, says an essential aspect of creativity is not being afraid to fail. Again, I'm not saying just go out there and fail, fail, fail. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying take the calculated risk. But don't be daunted if you do your best and you fail. Slack says, if you're not growing, you may not be taking enough measured risk. Thomas Jefferson, if you want something you've never had, you have to be willing to do something you've never done. Colin Powell, there are no secrets to success. It is the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. Oh, value quotations like that. Print them, put them up on your wall, memorize them, so that when you are facing your greatest challenge and your greatest doubt, that you could hold on to these and excel. So all of these thoughts are helping you and helping me to be prepared for success. In doing so, let's continue to read positive, uplifting literature, because that will influence our thought patterns, and value synergy and camaraderie. And the image that I've put there is taken from the movie Troy. When Achilles is coming off the ship with his men, one by one as they come off, they're being picked off. But he rallies them together with their shields, and together they can fend off some of the arrows, some of the spears, some of the fiery darts. Value, synergy, and camaraderie. And it's so very important that even as we acquire, that we are prepared to give. Give and do more than is expected. And I like the way Professor 𝗬𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗔𝗏 shares it. She says, do everything that is required of the job and more. There are persons who may seek to get us to just do minimum work, exert minimum effort. Those are losers. We don't want to hang out with them. We want to hang out with those like Professor Barreto, who would encourage us, do everything that is required of the job and more. And this is as true whether or not we are working in a unionized situation. So what does this mean to me as we wrap up today's webinar? We want to build better selves and a better nation. And we understand that good enough is not good enough if it can be better. So good is not good enough. And we understand that good is the enemy of great. We seek greatness, not to boost our egos. We seek greatness so that we could contribute in a bigger, better way to the society that has been so kind to us. So as we get ready to wrap up, as good as I am, how can I be better? That's the question that I invite you to ask. And all of us need to answer it. But also important, based on what I have, the knowledge and skills and attitudes that I have, who can I help to better their best efforts? And even as that image comes up with that person that you and I need to intercept with intent, write the name down so that we don't forget. A commitment that we will make. We commit to improve our performance, but we also commit to help others along the way. So whether we function as a manager, as a worker, as a son, a daughter, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, nephew, niece, friend, student, whoever, neighbor, churchgoer, that's a commitment that we make. So forgive me for pointing my finger at you. But these are things that you and I need to bear in mind. And for emphasis, I'm going to point my finger up a little more so that you understand the level of commitment that you must make, that I must make as we go through. Rick Rigby said, let people catch you in the act of excellence. That's what we want people to do. I like this one from Leonardo da Vinci. I have been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. And especially for our young people who are in the audience today, this quotation is for you. And the older ones among us, share this with you from our hearts. Beloved youth, you will have your trials and temptations through which you must pass. But there are great moments of eternity which lie ahead. You have our love and our confidence. We pray that you will be prepared for the reins of leadership. We say to you, arise and shine forth and be a light unto the world, a standard to others. So we commit to continue to strive for excellence in all that we do. As good as we are, we can always be better. And so I thank you. And I say that's all, folks, from me today. And we now open up for your questions. So Joanne, you will host for us the questions?
Sure, yes, thank you very much, Jules. Thank you very much for a very inspiring session, an enlightful session. I do like the canine attitude, and really and truly, the last bit stood out when you say you need to act now,
Yes.
do it now. So we do have a question or two in the chat box, and I remind our attendees that are coming in and that are here already, just to post your questions. So we have one from Charlene. As a young person in society who would like to hold a leadership position in the corporate world someday, what advice can you give in terms of obtaining valuable mentorship? Right, so Charlene is asking specifically about mentorship for young people.
Charlene, this is a very good question, and I see it in two ways. One, the first part, raising the question in terms of your quest for leadership. I always like to remind, especially young people, that for you to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower first. There's some persons who want to go into the enterprise and they want to get in right at the top. There is value in learning from the ground floor, doing the most menial things, but doing it to the best of your ability and you will rise. That will happen. The mentorship is very important, it's valuable. And if you will allow me, I know even though we're pressed for time, to just talk a little bit about the origin of that word, mentor and mentorship. It goes back to the Greek writings, where Odysseus was going off to fight in the Trojan War. He had one son named Telemachus, and he wanted to make sure that Telemachus would be cared for and somebody would be there to help him grow up, just in case he did not come back, Odysseus. The person had to have three qualities, and I'm using this to answer your question too. The person had to be able to share what was in the scrolls, or in what we now call books, the book knowledge. They had to share about best behavior. The old people always tell us manners and behavior will take you around the world. So what? Book knowledge, behavior, and the third was just as important. The person had to practice what they preach. They had to be a good example. Sometimes in the mentorship program, we need to be reminded of these three things: that a mentor must be prepared to share knowledge. A mentor must also be prepared to talk about best practices, ethics, integrity, honesty, and those principles that keep society strong. Purity. Those must be taught. And also the person must be living it. It's not saying do this, but they're doing something else. So Charlene, I would say there are still persons who have those qualities that can be mentors for you, but you have to be very selective. They must have the right attitude. They must be practicing the correct behaviors, and they must be able to dedicate the time to show you how you can go from step to step. I would also say that you could be mentored through books. There's some good books out there. And one of the books I often recommend for persons who are aspiring leaders is John Maxwell's book, The 360-Degree Leader. John Maxwell, the 360-degree leader. As a leader, how do you inspire those who report to you? How do you inspire those on the same level as you are? And how do you inspire those who are senior to you, the 360-degree leader? So Charlene, I trust that that would have answered your question in there. If not, you could always send me an email and we could always follow up and I could send you some articles.
Thank you. So as I listened to you, I thought about a question myself, you know, especially in the context of the Caribbean and the region that we're in, which has its own unique, you know, cultures and experiences, etc. Do you think in our Caribbean context, there is this pursuit for excellence, leadership excellence, personal excellence is more difficult from a male's perspective or a female's perspective? And I asked this, and I included gender because I noted that you paid particular attention in your presentation to represent both genders.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just kind of double click on that a little bit more in a Caribbean context.
Yes. And again, Joanne, that's a very valuable question, and it calls for maybe more discussion throughout the region. Let me say, I think the Caribbean region has been very fortunate compared to some other areas in that in many of our territories, opportunities have been created for our women to excel in the public sector and in the private sector. We're still seeing some areas where we refer to the glass ceiling and so on. But a lot of those glass ceilings are being broken. But I think so much depends on, especially our young people, and when I say young people, male and female, in understanding and appreciating that there is no limit, there should be no limitation to our young people. There should be no limitation to either gender in terms of excelling in any of the disciplines at all. And I have a serious problem, for instance, with parents who try to steer their girls away from science, away from mathematics, away from physics and chemistry and so on. I think we do them a disservice, away from mechanical engineering. And Joanne, you know, for instance, that in Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of the engineers in oil and gas are female. I think we need to make more of an effort to broadcast that information throughout Trinidad and Tobago and beyond, so that people understand that. Now, on the other side of it too, I have a problem with parents who guide their boys away from the more domestic type jobs, like being a chef and being a cook and so on. We should not continue what I think is a bad habit of stereotyping our genders into particular roles like that. And we have in the Caribbean created some excellent leaders from both genders, excellent men. We can call prime ministers, we can call leaders of opposition, females who have done their countries, done themselves, and done us as a people very well. I don't think we should put any limits on the gender in terms of their pursuit of excellence in the public sector, in the private sector, and in other spheres of operation.
Thank you. We have another question coming in from Naomi. In her continued quest for excellence, she's asking, how do you manage social issues to triumph above and not lose light?
That's a very good question. Naomi, so much depends on where your thoughts are. It's easy for us to lose hope and to be discouraged if we look at the negative. And this is why in the presentation too, I throw out a challenge that we have to be very careful, one, with who we hang out with, because negative people can influence us in a negative way. And two, so much depends on, again, what you're feeding your mind on. What are the books you're reading? What are, for instance, what are the video sites that you're going to? What are you looking at on YouTube? What are you looking at on Netflix? Because what are the soap operas that you're looking at? All of these impact the way we think. And so my suggestion to young people and my suggestion to all of us in general is that we have to be guardians of our thoughts. And to be guardians of our thoughts, we have to be so very protective of what we let into our thinking. Now, in saying that, I just want to throw out a plea to those of us who have children, especially young children. It's easy for us to give them an iPad and a tablet and a laptop and so on, and let them occupy themselves. A lot of them, you see little babies, 3 years, 4 years old, they spend a lot of time on their own little gadgets and so on. But we have to be guardians of their thoughts too, because some of the cartoons have mass value systems that are not in their best interest or our best interest as a society. And for those societies who categorize themselves as developed, but they have warped ideas about morality and about purity and so on, we have to guard our children and ourselves against compromising our own value systems based on what they tell us. So Naomi, I trust that that response is okay for you. Again, manage your thoughts by managing what you allow to go in through reading, through who you hang out with, and through what you view and what you listen to.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And you did say, you know, in my interpretation of your message, one of your messages, that accomplishments are not achieved alone, and it is done with a community. And sometimes that community, well, in the definition of community, we connect it to physical and people, yes. But your community could also be, as you rightly said, the books that you're reading, sure. The things that you expose your mind to via the social media and the telecoms, etc. You know, so we really want to pay attention to that. Yeah. I'm asking, is there anybody else in the chat? So we have a couple minutes again. Anybody else in the room that has any questions?
Joanne, while they look at the questions, let me just comment based on what you just said there. From my own experience too, we have to be so very careful when we are going through a very traumatic experience, when we are experiencing some kind of hurt, where we are vulnerable. That is the time when we have to be especially careful what thoughts we entertain and who we listen to, and also what we read, what we digest, and so on. So again, it's a word of caution out there, especially for our young people, but the older ones among us too can benefit from that. Agreed.
So we have no questions coming in. We have a couple comments thanking you for an excellent presentation, really saying that it's insightful and thought-provoking, as well as inspirational. So as we get ready to wrap up, Dr. Ferdinand, I'll just kind of come back to you a little bit for any sort of closing comments for our attendees that are here today, anything to pay attention to, any wide words of wisdom, so that we could actually look towards the future. And while you do that, I do see another question coming in, so I'm going to give you time to answer that, and then I'll take that question.
Well, I go back to that slide with the winning attitudes. I mean, it is something that I have found very beneficial to me. Constant and never-ending improvement, always trying to do your very best. You have a task to perform. How do I improve it? How do I do it better? And the can-do attitude that sometimes we tell ourselves we can't, when indeed we can. And they do it now. Avoid procrastination. Start the process. You want to write a book, you want to write a novel, at least start going through the table of contents. What do you want to have in it there? And then you could start fleshing it out. Beginning is half done.
Agreed. You know, it's funny, I was reading something as well, and it almost came across as a meme when we tend to procrastinate because, like, you know, I can't really run that 5K this morning. I'm not in the mood, I can't. And they said, well, it just takes a step. So even if you don't get to the 5K, it's good enough to get off the couch and get on the treadmill or get on the road for 2 minutes. Sure. It's better than that. Yes. I have another question coming in from Davy. How do you choose which areas to focus on when there's so many opportunities available. And of course, with the extent of access to digital, she's saying especially digital, how do you choose which areas to focus on?
Yes. Again, if we go back to that comment that I made when we talk about calculating risk, but we could also use the same kind of thoughts to calculate possibilities. In strategy, there is an aspect that we call strategic foresight. And with strategic foresight, you're trying to create the possible scenarios and how they're likely to pan out over time. I would suggest, Devi, that when you have options like that, you probably need to go through a more systematic, a more rigorous type of assessment based on what you see the possibilities are in terms of what are the likely returns on the particular area of focus. And when I say what are the likely returns, I'm not only talking about or referring to monetary returns, but we're also thinking of the benefits to you in terms of your own sense of accomplishment, your sense of achievement. We have a lot of multi-talented persons, and sometimes multi-talented persons could get to an area of paralysis, which I think is what Devi is referring to. There's so many opportunities there. I would say, one, do the analysis, and two, look at how you can do step by step with any or all of those options that are available to you. Going back to the can-do attitude, when I speak with young people who are multi-talented, and there's several of them around, they're gifted. They're gifted in music, they're gifted in mathematics, they're gifted in so many different areas, and sometimes they want to limit themselves to one. I suggest don't do that. Sometimes you have the capacity to do many of those. And to give you a life example, is the example of Michelangelo. Going back hundreds of years ago, Michelangelo was a good engineer, he was a good sculptor, he was a good painter, he was a good musician. You name it, the guy was good. What would this world have been like if Michelangelo just limited himself to being a sculptor? Now, our young people have many, many talents, and my plea with you is don't bury any of them. See how many of them you could use. Yes, you can excel more at one than the other, but the workplaces today are looking for what we call T people. Visualize capital T. So you have breadth in terms of multi-talents, multi-skills, but you also have depth where you go down deep. So you may be an accountant, but that doesn't mean that you don't have other skills and abilities. You may have IT, you may have agriculture, you may have fisheries, you may have a lot of other things in the T. So my plea is don't limit yourself.
Thank you very much. So as we come to the end of this session, we have someone sharing a quote in the chat, and I'll just share it for everyone here. On the Kaizen principle, continuous improvement, change for better.
Right.
Small improvements in small amounts. So we take baby steps to get there.
Sure.
We also had another quote coming in, another comment coming in saying excellence has no gender, which we've discussed and we've agreed. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to specifically and especially thank Dr. Jules Ferdinand for coming across, crossing shores and waters and borders, now that we are virtual, in order to share his pearls of wisdom and knowledge. And even, we spoke a lot and mentioned the future of the young people and what we need from the young people, but even the more mature ones that are in leadership roles, we don't stop our quest, we keep going, and it is our duty and our obligation to look behind and make sure we bring those along, right? So thank you everyone. Once again, as mentioned, I would be happy to forward the slides to those of us present here today. You will have it as a reference point. You will have some of the quotations as inspiration and reminders. So I wish everyone all the best. and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you too, Joanne.